I watched in shock as HOA bulldozers stormed onto my lakeside property in Wisconsin, tearing through the yard to install 172 solar panels without asking my permission. What would you do if a power-hungry HOA president and her loyal board members turned your peaceful retreat into a construction site? The rumbling shook my windows, and I jumped out of bed. Outside, bright yellow bulldozers smashed through my garden fence. My heart pounded as I rushed onto the porch in my pajamas. "Stop! What are you doing on my property?" I shouted. The workers didn't even glance at me. They kept digging up my flower beds and knocking over the young maple trees I had planted just last fall. I grabbed my phone and called the police. "There are people with bulldozers destroying my yard." "Sir, we've already received a call from the Lakewood Shores HOA," the officer replied calmly. "They have proper permits for this work." 6 months earlier, I had bought this home on a small peninsula connected to the mainland by a bridge. The deed clearly stated it was private property, a sanctuary I'd chosen for peace and quiet. I threw on some clothes and marched across my torn-up lawn to confront whoever was in charge. By a black SUV stood a woman in a tailored navy suit, checking off items on a clipboard. "Excuse me, what is going on here?" I demanded. She looked up with faint irritation. "Mr. Harris, I presume? I'm Margaret Doyle, president of the Lakewood Shores Homeowners Association. Why are bulldozers destroying my garden?" Margaret's smile was tight and calculated. "We've approved the installation of 172 solar panels on the eastern side of your property. It's for the community's benefit." I struggled to keep my voice steady. "This is my private land. You can't just—" "Actually, we can." She pulled a document from her designer bag. "Section 8, paragraph 12 of the covenant you signed gives the HOA access rights to waterfront properties for community improvements." My stomach dropped. I vaguely remembered signing a thick pile of papers at closing, but my lawyer had assured me everything was standard. "I want to see that covenant again," I said firmly. "Of course," she replied, her smile colder now. "Stop by the HOA office any time, but the work continues." A second bulldozer crashed through my gazebo, the place where I had my morning coffee and watched the sunrise. Workers began marking the ground for concrete foundations. I immediately called my real estate attorney, Daniel Kim, who promised to investigate. "Don't sign anything else," he warned. That evening, I sat on my broken porch, watching as floodlights lit up the construction site. The lake view I had saved 20 years to enjoy was now cluttered with heavy machinery. My elderly neighbor, Mrs. Thompson, who had lived in Lakewood Shores for decades, rowed over in her small boat. "I came as soon as I heard," she said carefully, climbing onto my dock. "This isn't right. Can they really do this?" I muttered bitterly. Mrs. Thompson sighed. "Margaret changed many rules after becoming president 3 years ago. The solar project was her big election promise, but everyone thought it would go on the community center roof." "Then why here? Why my land?" I asked. "Your property has the best sun exposure," she admitted quietly. "And Margaret tried to buy this land last year. The previous owner refused to sell." A chill ran down my spine. This wasn't just about solar panels. The next morning, Daniel called. His tone was grim. "The covenant does have that clause, but something looks off. That section seems to have been amended recently. I'll need to confirm with county records." Determined, I walked down to the construction site where crews were unloading metal frames. "Where's Mrs. Doyle?" I asked one of the workers. "Board meeting, community center," he replied without looking up. I took my boat across the lake to the community center, a large building overlooking the water. Inside, about 40 residents sat in rows while Margaret stood at a podium. The solar initiative will reduce everyone's electric bills by 35%, she announced smoothly. And it qualifies us for the state's green community tax benefits. A man in the audience raised his hand. I thought the panels were going on the community center. When did that change? The engineering survey showed insufficient roof support, Margaret explained without hesitation. Mr. Harris's property gets 40% more direct sunlight, making it the best location. I stood up. And did anyone bother asking me or even showing me this so-called survey? The room went quiet as every eye turned toward me. Margaret's lips tightened. Mr. Harris, we welcome all homeowners to meetings, but please wait to be recognized before speaking, she said firmly. A woman with perfectly styled blonde hair and oversized sunglasses rose to her feet. Point of order, Margaret. New homeowners should be informed about how things work here. She turned to me with a smile that felt more like a warning than a greeting. I'm Linda Brooks, HOA Vice President. We understand this is an adjustment, but soon you'll see the benefits of our community-first approach. Community first? I shot back. You mean taking over my private property without consent? Linda's smile didn't falter. The covenant you signed gives the association certain rights. Perhaps you should have read it more carefully. Several homeowners shifted uncomfortably in their chairs, but no one spoke. This meeting is about the budget, not reopening decided matters, Margaret snapped. Security, please escort Mr. Harris out if he can't follow proper protocol. A large man in a uniform moved toward me. Rather than make a scene, I left, but not before catching Mrs. Thompson's sympathetic gaze, along with a few others. Back at my property, the workers had already poured the first row of concrete foundations. My phone rang. It was Daniel again. I checked the county records, he said. That covenant clause was indeed amended. But here's the issue. It should have required 75% homeowner approval and state registration. I can't find records of either. Hope flared in my chest. So the whole project is illegal? It's complicated, Daniel cautioned. They could claim verbal approval or say paperwork was lost. We need more evidence. That evening, a knock came at my door. It was Mrs. Thompson, looking nervous. I shouldn't be here, she whispered, but you need to know. Margaret's husband owns the company installing the panels, and Linda's brother runs the maintenance contract. My mind spun. That's a conflict of interest. Be careful, she warned. The last neighbor who challenged Margaret's authority had his boat mysteriously damaged. Then he started getting HOA fines for violations no one else was cited for. After she left, I stood watching more trucks roll in with steel frames and glass panels. By tomorrow, the crews would start installing all 172 solar panels across my once beautiful shoreline. I couldn't stop wondering, what if I physically blocked them from continuing this invasion of my property? 2 weeks later, the solar array was complete. 172 gleaming panels stretching along the water. I couldn't escape them. Each afternoon, they reflected blinding light into my living room. At night, red maintenance lights blinked steadily, keeping me awake.
I tried fighting through every proper channel. I filed complaints with the county. I spoke at 3 HOA meetings. I even hired an inspector who confirmed the installation violated multiple building codes. Nothing changed. "Your inspection is invalid," Margaret said coldly. "Our contractors are certified green energy specialists." I tried reasoning with neighbors at the community pool. Most avoided eye contact. A few whispered that they agreed with me, but feared retaliation. "My son lost pool privileges last summer after my husband questioned the new assessment fees," one woman murmured before quickly walking away. At the next HOA meeting, I brought documentation. Property maps, my deed, county ordinances about waterfront construction. But Linda cut me off mid-sentence. "The community needs sustainable energy," she said smoothly, pushing her sunglasses higher on her nose, though we were indoors. "Your selfish attitude is disappointing, especially since we allowed your boathouse to remain, despite being 6 feet taller than code permits." I hadn't even known about the boathouse violation. Clearly, they were monitoring my property for any possible infraction. That evening, I received a certified letter. The HOA was fining me $200 a day for unauthorized landscaping changes. The flower beds I'd replanted after their bulldozers destroyed my garden. I couldn't sleep. The maintenance lights from the solar array flickered against my bedroom walls. I tossed and turned, feeling trapped on my own land. Around 3 a.m., desperate for distraction, I dug into a box of old books I'd inherited from my grandfather. Among dusty novels and faded photo albums, I found a leather-bound journal. My grandfather had been a botanist who specialized in native trees. The journal was filled with notes on species that thrived in our region. One page caught my attention. Hybrid poplars alongside empress trees create natural privacy screens. Both species can grow 8 to 12 feet per year under optimal conditions. A plan began forming in my mind. The next morning, I visited Mrs. Thompson. Her lakeside cottage was surrounded by the most vibrant garden in the community. "Those panels are an eyesore," she said as she poured me tea. "Margaret promised they'd be hidden by landscaping, but clearly that was a lie." I showed her my grandfather's journal. "I'm thinking of planting trees along my shoreline." Her eyes lit up mischievously.
"Fast-growing trees to block solar panels," Mrs. Thompson said with a sly grin. "I've got something special in my greenhouse. Hybrid poplars and empress trees. With my fertilizer mix, they grow even faster than your grandfather recorded." "Would you sell me some seedlings?" I asked eagerly. "Better than that," she replied. "I'll help you plant them. I've been propagating these beauties for years." My bank account took a hit as I withdrew my savings, but seeing Mrs. Thompson load 200 seedlings onto my boat felt like the first real victory in this war. We studied the sun's path and calculated exactly where each tree should go to block the panels by next year. That night, under cover of darkness, I began planting with only a headlamp for light. The soil was still soft from the construction, making it easier to dig. I had nearly 30 seedlings in the ground when a bright light swept across the shoreline. "What are you doing out here so late?" I froze, dirt-stained shovel in hand. The HOA's hired security guard was walking toward me, flashlight aimed at my face. "Just some late-night gardening," I said, forcing a casual tone. "It's cooler at night." He lowered the beam slightly. "Those look like trees." "Decorative shrubs," I lied quickly, "for privacy." The guard studied the saplings. "Mrs. Doyle told us to report any activity near the solar installation." My chest tightened. I thought it was over before it began. But then, to my surprise, his face softened. My grandfather's farm was taken through eminent domain for a shopping mall. Never sat right with me. He clicked off his flashlight. "I don't come to this side of the lake until 2 a.m. That gives you 3 more hours." When he left, I worked frantically, planting row after row. By dawn, all 200 seedlings were in the ground, each one a symbol of hope. The next day, I shored up my legal defenses. Daniel helped me file a formal appeal with the county zoning board, and I reached out to the state environmental agency about possible wetland disruption from the solar array. That afternoon, pounding rattled my front door. Linda Brooks stood there, cheeks flushed with fury. "Remove those trees immediately. They violate Section 12.4 of the Landscaping Covenant." "Which prohibits what, exactly?" I asked calmly. "Unauthorized modifications that impact community assets." I smiled faintly. "Interesting interpretation. Section 5.7 explicitly permits homeowners to plant native species for erosion control, which is exactly what I've done after your bulldozers wrecked my shoreline." Her eyes narrowed. "The board will vote on this tonight. Expect heavy fines." "I'll be at the meeting to present my case," I replied. Moments after she stormed off, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Check your email. Sent documents you need. Not everyone supports Margaret's solar scheme." The email contained meeting minutes from 2 years earlier. The board had indeed approved a solar project, but only for the community center roof. There was no mention of my property. That evening, the emergency board meeting was packed. Word of the conflict had spread quickly. "These trees were planted maliciously to obstruct the solar array," Margaret declared. "Mr. Harris must remove them and pay damages." "May I respond?" I asked, standing. "You have 2 minutes," Linda sneered. I projected the minutes onto the wall. "The board never approved panels on my property. The vote 2 years ago clearly designated the community center roof." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Margaret's jaw tightened. "Plans evolved based on engineering requirements," she said briskly. "Without votes or homeowner notification," I countered. "And county records show no permits for construction on my land." An older man rose from the back. "Point of order. As former treasurer, I recall we were told this installation required a 75% community vote since it cost over $100,000. Margaret glared. "We had emergency authorization." "From whom?" several voices demanded at once. The meeting dissolved into chaos. I caught Mrs. Thompson's proud smile from across the room. As I left, 3 neighbors approached to offer support. One was a contractor who promised to check building codes. Another worked at the local paper and asked for documentation for a possible story. For the first time, I felt momentum shift.
That night, I slept soundly, dreaming of tall trees shielding my home from the glaring panels. But at dawn, a violent crash jolted me awake. Looking outside, my blood froze. A landscaping crew was on my shoreline, chainsaws roaring. They were cutting down my newly planted trees. Who had authorized this new assault on my land, and how far was I willing to go to defend it? 6 months blurred into dirt, sweat, and stubborn hope. I rose before dawn every day, tending my growing rebellion. My hands cracked and bled from digging in rocky soil, but I couldn't stop, not with Margaret watching from her boat, binoculars trained on me. "Look at them," I whispered to my trees.
One misty morning, the hybrid poplars and empress trees had already shot up to 5 feet tall, faster than I ever dared hope. Their leaves rustled like applause as I walked among them, my secret defense against HOA tyranny. Across the lake, residents grumbled about the solar panels, the blinding glare at sunset, the constant buzzing of the inverters, the maintenance trucks rattling down quiet streets at odd hours. Yet nobody challenged Margaret directly, not until my trees began casting their first shadows. "Emergency meeting!" screamed the red-lettered email from the HOA. I smiled. They'd noticed. When I entered the community center, heads turned and silence fell. Item 1. Illegal vegetation on lakefront property, Margaret declared, slamming her gavel. Her normally polished hair looked frazzled. "Why?" I asked calmly. "They're native species, drought-resistant, and excellent for erosion control." "They're blocking our community investment," Linda Brooks shouted, her oversized sunglasses unable to mask her fury. "Do you know how much those solar panels cost?" "Approximately $438,000, I replied evenly, "which is strange since the market rate should have been closer to $300,000. A ripple of murmurs spread through the crowd. "And I'd like to know why Lake Tech Industries was chosen for the installation," I continued, "especially since their CEO plays golf with your husband every Wednesday, Mrs. Doyle." "That's irrelevant," Margaret snapped, pounding her gavel again. "We are here to discuss your deliberate sabotage of community property." "I'm simply landscaping my land," I said with a shrug. "Section 5 of our covenant clearly permits homeowners to cultivate vegetation for privacy and aesthetic purposes. Personally, I find these trees very aesthetically pleasing." Thomas Green, my mainland neighbor, suddenly stood. I'd once counted him an ally. He had complained often about the glare on his deck. "I move we amend the bylaws to restrict tree height on waterfront properties," he said. The betrayal hit like a gut punch. Later, I'd learn about the tax break Margaret had promised him. "Such amendments require a 75% community vote and proper notice," I reminded everyone, clutching a printed copy of the bylaws. Margaret's thin smile made my blood run cold. "We'll hold the vote next week. I'm sure everyone will see reason." I underestimated her determination. While I tended my fast-growing trees, Margaret launched her campaign. She visited absentee owners, collected proxy votes, and spread rumors that I was sabotaging the environment.
One rainy Thursday, I returned home to find my island covered in bright yellow violation notices, planted like enemy flags among my saplings. Vegetation violation, remove within 48 hours or face daily fines of $500. My stomach sank. At $500 per day, they would bankrupt me in months. Thunder rolled over the lake as my phone buzzed with an unknown number. "Hello?" I answered, rain dripping from my hair. "Don't remove a single sapling," a whisper said. "Check your email. You'll find what you need." "Who is this?" I demanded. The line went dead. Lightning illuminated the hated solar panels, gleaming like alien technology against the stormy sky. My hands shook as I opened my laptop. Who was helping me? And could this mysterious evidence save my trees? A new email sat in my inbox, subject line blank, with a single attachment, truth.pd. I clicked. Yellowed HOA meeting minutes filled the screen, dated 12 years ago, long before I bought the property. A line was highlighted in neon yellow. Amendment 8.3. Any community improvement project on private property requires written approval from the affected homeowner and majority vote from association members. I gasped. This amendment was missing from my copy of the covenant. The solar project violated their own rules. "Who sent this?" I whispered into my empty living room. Outside, my trees swayed in the storm. Their leaves glittered with raindrops, as if whispering back, "Someone on your side." Sleep never came. By flashlight, I dug through boxes in my attic until dawn. There, among my closing documents, was my covenant copy, doctored, stripped of Amendment 8.3. I paced the kitchen, gulping bitter coffee. Margaret had power, money, and connections. I had trees, and now the truth. But nobody wanted to hear it. The local paper refused to run my story. "Can't risk upsetting advertisers," the editor mumbled. The county inspector dismissed it as a private community matter. My lawyer called it complicated and urged me to work within the system. The system was rigged, and my 48-hour deadline was ticking away. With only 24 hours left, a desperate idea struck me. I grabbed my phone and called a local TV station. "Consumer Watchdog Department," a bored voice answered. "I have a story about HOA corruption, forged documents, shady finances, and environmental destruction on private property." A long pause. Then, "We'll send someone tomorrow afternoon."
My property was on fire. While I waited helplessly for emergency crews, I spotted a familiar white SUV parked on the access road. Karen Doyle sat behind the wheel, phone raised, snapping photos of me panicking. She was smiling as my trees went up in flames. When she noticed me staring, she gunned the engine and sped off. Moments later, fire trucks roared down the road, sirens wailing. Chief Rodriguez was the first to jump out. "What happened here?" he demanded. "The HOA set my trees on fire without permission," I told him, thrusting my phone forward with the video evidence. His jaw tightened. This isn't a permitted burn. We never issued authorization. His crew began dousing the flames, but the damage was already devastating. My tree army, my last defense against the solar panels, was reduced to blackened trunks and smoldering stumps. That night, sleep was impossible. The acrid stench of charred wood clung to every corner of my house. Around midnight, thunder cracked across Sapphire Lake. Rain pounded against the roof, lightning flashing like nature's own wrath. One bolt struck so close that my living room lit up like daylight, the boom rattling every window. Then came silence, just rain. At dawn, I slogged through the mud of my ruined garden. My breath caught when I saw the solar project's main control box melted, wires dangling, at least 30 panels cracked or hanging loose. My phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. Check your email. Evidence about the fire. I opened the attachment. Photos showed Karen passing Derek White an envelope of cash. Another image, a signed order with Judith Palmer's name scrawled across the bottom. Remove trees by any means necessary before inspection. Shock gave way to fury. Almost instantly, a community alert appeared on my phone. Emergency HOA meeting, 3 p.m., attendance mandatory. I texted Helen Carter, "Are you coming?" Her reply came instantly, "Already here." With the district attorney, "Don't tell anyone, bring the evidence." Could this be the turning point or another trap? By 3 o'clock, the community center was packed, every chair filled, people lining the walls, whispering about the fire and the solar damage. TV news vans idled outside, cameras ready. Harold Jenkins, the HOA's lawyer, looked sweaty and pale as he shuffled papers at the front. "Where's President Palmer?" someone shouted. Harold cleared his throat. "Miss Palmer sends her regrets. An urgent matter." "You mean the police at her house?" yelled Mrs. Gonzalez. The crowd erupted. Karen bolted to her feet, snatching the microphone. "Everyone calm down. As vice president, I'll run this meeting. First order of business, fines for the damaged trees and lightning sabotage." "Sabotage?" I barked, rising to my feet. "You think I control the weather?" Nervous laughter rippled through the hall. Karen's face reddened. "I have something to share," I said, walking forward. Karen tried to block me, but shockingly, Harold stepped between us. "The chair recognizes the island resident," he said firmly. I connected my phone to the projector. The photo of Karen handing Derek cash filled the screen. Gasps erupted. "This was yesterday morning, before the fire," I explained. Swipe. Judith's signed order appeared. The room broke into shouts. Karen lunged for my phone, but Harold grabbed her arm. "That's fake!" she screamed. The back doors swung open. Helen Carter strode in, followed by a stern woman in a gray suit and 2 uniformed officers. "District Attorney Rivera," the woman introduced herself. "We are investigating financial fraud and property destruction. Miss Doyle, remain seated." One officer moved to Karen, the other barred the exit. Rivera faced the stunned residents. "Our office has obtained evidence that the solar company hired by your HOA is owned by Judith Palmer's brother-in-law.
The board authorized payments at 3 times market value, with the surplus routed offshore and divided among several members. A reporter raised his camera as people shouted in disbelief. Thomas Harrison stood up, but the solar project was supposed to bring clean energy to the neighborhood. Helen stepped forward, voice cutting through the noise. Follow the money, Thomas. Your fees went up 40% last year. Did you ever see the financial reports? No, you didn't, because they were never filed. Rivera nodded gravely. The HOA's accounts are frozen pending investigation, and the so-called maintenance fund nearly empty. The room fell silent. For the first time in months, the power balance had shifted.
Harold looked ghostly pale. "As legal counsel," he began, voice shaking, "I must advise that the HOA faces serious liability for the destroyed trees and the illegal burn." Karen suddenly bolted toward the side exit. An officer intercepted her before she reached the door. "Let go of me!" she shrieked. "Do you even know who my husband is?" "Yes, ma'am," the officer replied evenly. "He's already at the station answering questions about wire fraud." The room fell silent. Slowly, Eleanor Wallace pushed herself to her feet, leaning on her cane. "I've lived here 30 years," she said firmly. "Never have I witnessed such shameful behavior. This community deserves new leadership, honest leadership." She lifted a trembling hand and pointed straight at me. "Someone who fights for what's right, even when standing alone." Applause began at the back of the room, hesitant at first, then growing until the entire hall thundered with clapping. 3 months later, the island looked reborn. The surviving trees had already shot upward, stretching tall enough to block the view where the solar panels once stood. Those panels were gone now, properly recycled and reinstalled on the roof of the community center, where they finally served a purpose. I knelt in the soil, planting new seedlings where the scorched trunks had fallen. The earth felt rich, alive again. A small boat glided toward my dock. Thomas and Eleanor stepped out, bringing a picnic basket. "The new garden looks wonderful," Eleanor called, waving. "Thanks to your miracle tree fertilizer," I replied, helping her up the steps. Thomas handed me a folded newspaper. "Thought you'd want to see this." The headline read, "HOA Fraud Case. Former Officials Sentenced." We sat together on the porch, eating sandwiches and sipping lemonade, watching the calm ripples of Sapphire Lake. No ugly panels, no scheming neighbors, no threats, just nature and good company. "You know," Thomas said with a chuckle, "when I first complained about those panels, I never imagined where it would lead." Eleanor patted my hand gently. "Sometimes standing up for your land means standing up for everyone. One person can make a difference." I nodded, watching a family of ducks paddle past the shore. The new HOA bylaws hung framed in my office. All major decisions require 75% resident approval. Private property remains private, and every meeting must include refreshments. Thomas laughed when he read that last rule aloud. "Sometimes," I said, smiling at the rows of new trees, "you need to grow an army of oaks to defend your home. But in the end, it's the community you build that matters most. Justice, like these trees, just needed the space to grow."